PHIREON.com. Yes. Choice is yours.
Greetings to all of humanity and all sentient beings here on Earth. You have made it to 2021. You and your family have survived centuries of wars, famines, and pandemics to see you and your children usher in yet another year. You made it. Congratulations. In the manner of our New Year's traditions, we would like to take stock of the year and what came before. Yes, it has been a tough one. However, I would guess that our great-grandfathers in the trenches of World War I, our grandfathers on the beaches of Normandy, or our great-grandmothers in the Great Depression might have experienced tougher times. We should still be thankful that our suffering has been relatively benign in respect to the general improvement of circumstances as a species and as a civilization. With that in mind, we'd like to take you a moment to reflect over not just the last year, but the last half a millennium, just 10 generations. What was it like back then? Well, 500 years ago, your family members probably worked on or owned a farm. If there was a bad harvest or the cattle got sick and died, your family probably got sick and died as well. 500 years ago, communities were small, with little or no social mobility. You most likely wouldn't have traveled more than 20 miles from your homestead. If you were born a farmer, you would probably die a farmer. However, your suffering would not be for long, as life expectancy was short, and you would be lucky to live past the age of 35. 500 years ago, there was no access to antibiotics, and pain medication was not readily available. Could you imagine childbirth, if you're a woman of conventional thinking, without doctors, or tooth abscess, without access to medicine or dentists? In cities, people threw their excrement onto the streets, and the drinking water would be like drinking from a puddle, after your neighbors had relieved themselves in it, and it was very likely to make you ill. Your diet was not varied, and you lacked vital nutrients. In fact, Elizabeth I of England was seen as one of the cleanest people of her age, yet she bathed only about 4 times a year. You also had very little access to education or information. 500 years ago, you could probably fit every book read by Shakespeare into a suitcase, meaning that's not a lot. Even for the wealthy, life back then would be austere and challenging by almost any modern standards, even compared against the poorest in our societies. Despite its criticism, we all have to admit that the capitalist system has undoubtedly seen an overwhelming rise in ingenuity, life expectancy, and living standards. And you helped make that happen, and your family did as well. And you are probably listening to this in an environment of relative comfort. Indeed, for most of you, you probably have more people working for you, more access to technology, and more exotic foods and more exotic trinkets from around the world than even the most powerful emperors of antiquity. However, as we noted, suffering is relative, and nobody among us would argue that all is well. In fact, it's quite the opposite. These are times of great change. We are in the midst of a revolution. We are in the midst of several. Our industry is changing, our politics are changing, our consciousness are changing, our economics are changing, and history has shown us many times over that when technology is revolutionized, consciousness, political, and economic revolutions are not far behind. Take, for example, how the burgeoning industrial societies that grew up around the 1700s in Europe changed the landscape, the politics, and the hearts and minds of men and women across the globe forever. With new technology comes new wealth, and with new wealth in the hands of new people, we demand new freedoms, new restraints, new economic markets, new visions of reality, and new socio-political economic systems. And there is plenty wrong with our current system. The endangered elephant in the room is that we cannot escape the fact that our geological, biological, political, and economic systems are under extreme strain and pressure caused by the systemic exploitation of our resources and the mismanagement of our resources and our political, social, and economic contracts being vastly outdated. To brush the surface of the problem, our populations have grown exponentially for centuries, so that in America today, for example, democratic representation has been diluted more than 100 times over. Where a senator may have represented 10,000 people in 1776, a very small town by today's standards, that same role would now see them represent up to 1 million people or more, the size of a small country. Try and represent the mix of ideas, needs, and requirements of your own family. You probably couldn't do that if you tried. To save time, let's oversimplify things a bit when talking about our money. Our banking and taxation systems have failed us. To today's standards, the US debt is totaling $27 trillion. That's a debt of over $80,000 per every man, woman, and child before they're even born. We live on a globe, a closed system, albeit a large one, and the money just simply does not disappear. It's like a game of Monopoly when the bank has won, but to keep playing it gives you extra money, knowing full well it owns everything anyway. In fact, Jeff Bezos alone made enough money during this pandemic, this year, to pay the tuition fees of every college student in America with $20 billion to spare. Did he do that? No. For somebody on minimum wage to make $20 billion, they would have to work about 1.3 million years. We need a fairer distribution of resource. End of story. Better management. Regardless of what your views on climate change are, whether it's natural or man-made, our beautiful jewel of a planet is changing, and we need to adapt. Our systems need to be kinder to the Earth and its creatures. Eco-responsibility is central to our mission. And as in the 1700s, when most of our political and economic systems were born, we are once again at this crossroads, where our technology has revolutionized our lives, and our political and economic systems have suddenly found themselves out of date. At the same time, we have access to more information than at any point in history, and it grows every single moment. As our circumstances evolve and mirror the nascent years of the modern world, so does our self-reflection. It is no coincidence that many of us look towards nature, towards indigenous or more antiquated spirituality, roots, to guide us as our planet faces unprecedented challenges. It's no coincidence that the word freedom is on the hearts and lips of men and women and children around the world as they contemplate a bleaker future experienced by their parents and grandparents. This is one of those ages that will define the next 1,000 years of human civilization. Like the year of 1776, the American independence, 2021 will define our political, social, and consciousnesses far beyond our own personal lives. The world we build now is going to define lives for generations. Will they look upon us now as we look upon our forefathers? Or will they look upon us as the end of the golden age? Will they look back and say, thank you for doing something? Or will they look back and say, why didn't you do anything? And how will this age be defined? It will be defined like we define any great shift in power. It will be defined by how we decide to organize our societies and economies, how we decide and assign our exercised freedoms and responsibilities, how we decide to share the surplus amongst ourselves. There is no great conspiracy at this level. We are the ones who decide how things work, and we have to take responsibility and accountability. Conceptualized in 2011, PHIREON has anticipated this moment in history for nearly a decade. What is PHIREON? Simply put, it's a marriage of all the current online systems we rely on into one holistic, decentralized network. It'll be your Amazon, your PayPal, your Facebook, your Patreon, your YouTube, all rolled into one, with a strong belief in your freedom. Your commercial activities will not define or enslave you. Artists, thinkers, writers, and visionaries will be fully supported with a strong dedication to free speech and free will. It will be one unified system of self-determination, social media, online marketplaces, the Internet of Things, and eco-responsibility, and based on the steadfast belief in the altruistic aspect of humanity. Our dedicated visionaries, who include the late Bernard Lietaer, chief architect of the Euro, have prepared a complementary system to the one raging out of control behind you. Our complementary currency systems will offer security and support across countries and fluctuating economic and geopolitical situations, while the world readjusts. Our marketplaces will mirror the best aspects of the services and goods you want in an ecologically responsible manner, and will redistribute goods, surplus, and profits through consensus decision-making. Our platform will support the services, education, and content you really want and need. In PHIREON, you are the owner, you are the corporation. You will decide what we do with our surplus for the good of humanity. It's time to reconnect with the spirit of liberty and freedom. It's time for PHIREON. The choice is yours.
Yes.